Administrator, first let me say I welcome my colleague from West Virginia's interest in mass transit. We need more advocates. As someone who is one of the leaders of the fight here on mass transit and all of its iterations, I can tell you we can use all the help we can get because it's constantly a challenge, and that's why I appreciate hearing it, because it's constantly a challenge to understand the importance of mass transit in our funding formulas. We worked hard last year in MAP-21 to ratchet it up a little bit, but we're still nowhere near where we should be for the demands that there are, whether they be light rail or bus or whatever. So, and I just want to compliment you, Administrator, for a very, I think, good job in the midst of a lot of challenges, and I appreciate your approach to the whole effort nationally on mass transit. In that regard, let me say that in MAP-21, I worked to create a new transit-oriented development planning pilot program to provide grants for communities to create mixed-use walkable developments and around federally supported transit lines. And I sent a letter to FTA this December with 7 of my colleagues, including 3 on this committee, Senator Schumer, Warner, and Hagan, asking for this program to be expedited. To date, the FTA has not made an announcement of funds for this program, which is authorized at $10 million in FY13 and 14. And given the short time frame of MAP-21, it's important that we get this program underway so we have results to evaluate sooner rather than later. So why has the FTA not yet announced the availability of funding for this program, and what timeline do you have for making this announcement?
Senator, we are well aware of the program and cognizant of the committee members' interest, and most notably yours as a champion for the program. We, quite frankly, in our prioritization scheme, I was asked earlier by Senator Crapo, what were we going to prioritize given all of the new requirements of MAP-21? As I said in my opening statement, MAP-21 for transit was like 7 years of policy in a 2-year bill, and we had to prioritize what we were going to take on in what order. As it relates to the TOD development program, we thought it wise, not just from our own selfish administrative responsibilities, but also for the opportunities for the communities to come in to get 2 years of money and then compete 2 years of money. So we will have a competition for the full $20 million rather than 10 one year and 10 the next. We thought that would be both efficient, also increase the opportunities for a diversity of players to come in at a more meaningful level of money. Our goal is to start that process and get notices out the door in the spring and compete it this summer. You know, I apologize for the delay in getting to this. It is stacked up with a lot of other new MAP-21 requirements, most notably the safety requirements, which we very much welcome, the changes to the formula programs, which we obviously had to put out on the street very rapidly.
Well, I appreciate that, and I realize what we did in MAP-21 because I'm working with the chair. As the subcommittee chair, we put a lot of things in there. But to the extent that we have a pilot program and resources dedicated for it, what I'd hate to see is that the pilot program doesn't ever get to fruition because we waited too late.
That's not going to happen. It's strictly a matter of time.
All right. Next is FTA recently announced the next round of Sandy recovery transit funding, $3 billion for resiliency efforts. And according to your announcement, this funding is, quote, intended to protect public transportation infrastructure that has been repaired or rebuilt after Hurricane Sandy, or that is at a risk of being damaged or destroyed by a future natural disaster. It also goes on to state that you may consider geographic diversity and diversity between transit modes when making these awards. My question is, how high of a priority will FTA place on protecting assets that were hardest hit by Hurricane Sandy, and how you're going to balance the considerations of geographic and model diversity versus protecting the areas most devastated by Hurricane Sandy?
Well, I've said before at this table, in fact, but in other venues, that our highest priority in allocating these funds is going to be protecting the existing transit infrastructure that serves millions of passengers each day. Those systems, those existing rail lines, have in many cases flooded multiple times. As you know, some of the infrastructure that flooded under Hurricane Sandy had flooded just 1 year earlier under Hurricane Irene. And the President, in requesting this resiliency funding, made clear that he puts a strong priority in requesting that funding on ensuring that the taxpayers will not, going forward, have to pay to restore the infrastructure a second, third, or a fourth time. That's going to be our priority as we look at it. We are going to be working carefully, and we have conferences set up with all of the likely applicants to talk about looking at a comprehensive plan and seeing how they're going to protect the most vulnerable elements of the system, and look at it from the perspective of a system, which is to say, we're not very interested in an investment that will ensure that we have protected one portion of a rail line if, in fact, we're just going to have some other portion of the rail line that also is serving 80% of the same traffic washed out. That's not going to maintain mobility in the face of the next disaster. So those are going to be our priorities going in. You know, it is hard for me to say now, until we get all the applications in, how some of the other factors like geographic diversity and other things will play out. I think we have put out a good notice that takes into account all of the critical factors that we need to look at, and when we get the applications in, we'll then sort of have to rack and stack them, make sure that the investments are cost beneficial, capture the most critical infrastructure on both sides of the river, and also make sure that we are fulfilling the President's commitment to ensuring that we don't pay a second and third and fourth time to restore it.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, as someone who, along with Senator Schumer, led the fight for the Sandy money, and particularly to make sure that the transportation elements of it were part of it, I certainly believe that the consequences of systems moving large numbers of Americans and who have a history of constant challenges due to flooding and weather-related issues make a highest priority use, just simply on the number of people being serviced and the reality that we've had repetitive loss. So we want to avoid the repetitive loss for the taxpayers. We want to maximize the number of Americans who are using a transit system. So while there's obviously a whole host of challenges, you know, I look forward to that being the reality. Finally, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wise, with reference to bus rapid transit projects, how do you see the role of the BRT playing in the future of U.S. transit services? These projects are very often appealing as a lower cost, more flexible transit option, but they lack some of the service characteristics and economic development potential of others.
Yes to both of those, Senator. Thank you. In the work we did actually for the committee several years ago on BRT, I think the results of that are promising, but there are constraints, as you mentioned. A bus is not a train, and some people view it that way. That said, given the funding environment that we're in right now and will be in for the foreseeable future, I think a lot of areas see BRT as a good alternative, and one that is much more feasible to implement than rail, which tends to be, as I noted in my statement, much more expensive. Now, that said, there are characteristics of BRT that are being implemented that make it stand apart from regular buses. So you'll see in the systems that we visited, Seattle, Eugene, a few other places, there'll be nicer, newer, more brightly painted buses. The bus stops will be above the ground. There'll be not people putting a card or money into a machine. Rather, they'll buy their tickets beforehand. So there are some similarities to rail travel. And the very sophisticated BRTs, not so much what you've seen here, but for example, probably the poster child for the best BRT system in the world is in Bogota, Colombia, where it looks very much like a train. In fact, you have to look closely to see the difference. The stations are very ornate. They look like, very nice rail stations. You don't really see that here, and the dedicated guideways are also kind of a mixed bag. There are some that are where they have more dedicated guideways than others, and some of that, again, is cost. I can recall when we visited the system in Eugene, Springfield, Oregon, that there were a couple areas where it's just impossible to give a dedicated guideway to the system just because of the complicated intersection it was trying to navigate. So we've seen some mixed results, but as I noted, most of the people that we talk to in the different systems really see promise with BRT. It's much less expensive and much quicker to implement, and they have seen some economic development. As I mentioned, the one in Cleveland, Ohio, where they've seen, the officials there told us they'd seen $4 to $5 billion worth of development along that Euclid Avenue corridor that leads from downtown up to the Cleveland Clinic area. And another one in Kansas City in a rather sort of depressed area not too far from downtown Kansas City. The True system there has brought some additional development and gotten some additional grants with the promise that the BRT was going to help spur development in that area. So I think that, and I think you'll see a lot of development going on here in Montgomery County, which is looking to implement a fairly extensive bus rapid transit along the Interstate 270 corridor. So I think a lot of jurisdictions are seeing real promise in bus rapid transit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.